Hello, this is author Linda Vettrus-Nichols, your educational efficiency expert and creator of the Pattern Learner System, a variety of individual kits that support your child's innate capacity to learn. I believe that early intervention is key for ensuring that all children reach their full potential in math, reading, handwriting, and spelling. I have an amazing guest with me to introduce to you. Lisa DiSciullo is a warm and empathic parent educator who empowers parents to shift parenting dilemmas such as power struggles, a constant need for reminding, and battles over screen time or homework, just to name a few. Through her classes, workshops, and private coaching, parents learn how to get their children to listen, resulting in competent, independent, and resourceful children. Her clients become confident parents who are able to build strong family bonds. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
Absolutely. I just love chatting with you. You have just so many brilliant ideas to share with parents. I can't wait to get going on your slides here.
Great.
So real quick though, do me a favor and just share your story of transformation, Lisa.
Okay. So I have three children. They are 23, 25, and 27, and they are launched. They are educated and independent. They live in their own apartments. They have successful romantic relationships, and they're most importantly off the family payroll.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. So, but it wasn't always that way. 16 years ago, I was a frazzled, frustrated parent. Our household was filled with conflict, arguing over homework, chores, sibling rivalry, a lot of wrestling going on, and I was pulling my hair out. So one of my children at that point in time was struggling seriously academically in school, and the teachers recommended that I send him for the whole battery of tests to see what was going on. When they came back with the results, I said, great, now I know what I can do for him, how I can support him to be successful, but how can you support me? Because I feel like a failure as a parent. All I ever do is yell and scream, and nobody listens anyway. And so they pointed me to the Parent Encouragement Program, which is a nonprofit in DC, and suggested I take some parenting classes. And I was like, parenting classes? What, isn't that for people with babies? And they said, no, absolutely not, all the way up through teenagers. It's important to have skills to learn how to be a parent.
Right.
So started taking classes, absolutely loved them, took every class they had, totally changed my family.
Nice.
We had more harmony, we got things done, and most importantly, my kids could grow and learn how to be responsible for themselves rather than depending on me to do it for them.
Nice.
So I decided the only way I could, after I took all the classes that they had, the only way I could continue with it is to become a leader, and found so much fulfillment in working with other parents. And so I became a parent educator and started teaching classes for them, and been absolutely loving it ever since.
That's so cool. And your own family background, when you were growing up, it was like you had a wonderful mom. She just wasn't there. 4 kids, single mom working. You did the latchkey kid thing, right? So,
right.
Yeah. And so once you started to have your family, you wanted things to shift and change.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay. All right. Let's move on. Okay. So be on the same team. That's kind of the crux of what you're doing with parents in establishing the whole family bond thing is getting everybody on the same page. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that, or how you do that?
Yeah. So, when our children are born, they can't do anything for themselves. So we feed them and diaper them and, put them down for naps and basically tell them when to sleep. And that works really great for that period of time. And then when they get a little bit older, we teach them to walk and talk, and then they go off to school, and we manage their lives through the elementary school years. And sometimes what we find is that parents tend to be over managing, and sometimes they tend to be under managing. And it's hard to find that sweet spot. And then eventually when they become teenagers, we want them to be making their own decisions for themselves. So what I mean when I say be on the same team is rather than being continuing that idea of managing their lives and telling them what to do, which creates almost an adversarial relationship. And most parents that come to me, have that relationship where they're opposite each other, they're opposite their children and kind of butting heads. Is that really our goal is to kind of be on the same side of the table with them, be partners with them to help them approach life and manage life independently on their own. And that's the ultimate goal.
So more like a facilitator.
Absolutely. And we're teaching them to lean into their own capabilities. And what's important is that we see them as capable people. We see them as teachable, and we treat them respectfully to help develop them as people, rather than this idea of, kind of living in survival mode, which is just, get your shoes on, get your backpack, get in the car, we've got to go, kind of managing to what the things we have to do versus the things that we're becoming or that we're hoping they're becoming.
Yeah, and everybody kind of focused in on the outcomes, right?
Right.
What do you really want? And yeah, it's kind of like they're foreigners in a new land, so it's so easy to talk down to children, and it's difficult to sometimes to remember that, it's like a new language to them and a new place to live, as if they were foreigners in a new country, right? And so many of what parents think is like a mistake that a child made. I believe there's no mistakes in life, only valuable learning experiences. But, a child makes a mistake. It's really not a mistake. They just didn't know, right? And if you went to a foreign country, you'd be a complete mess unless you had somebody there guiding you and facilitating, what's happening next for you and filling you in on how to handle that. Does that make sense?
Yes. One of the core of our programs, or one of the skills that we talk about is training. And it's not only training them in, how to use a spoon to feed themselves, but training them in how to be a good friend, and training them in where the recycling goes, and training them in how to manage their schedule after school to get their homework done, but still have some downtime. And parents underestimate that need. They assume that since the kids are observing them, that they'll just learn it.
Right.
And when you take that time for training, it's so encouraging to the child that they actually, want to learn this new skill. And then they're proud of themselves that they can do more.
Right. And the word training, kind of throws you into like dogs and dog training. And it's really not that. It's just exposure and saying, here's what I found works best for me. And, why don't you try it this way? Oh, I can see that, if you changed it just a little bit, that would work even better for you. What do you think, right? And just really get in there with that connection and communication and that ownership for that child. Do you agree?
Exactly. And, you're also pointing to, giving them some guidelines, but also giving them some freedom to adapt it to their own style and their own way of thinking and doing things. And, not making a judgment on what the right way to do everything is or the wrong way to do it. Know that they're going to create a way that is successful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So living in survival mode, can you give us some scenarios that, you've intervened in where a family was just completely living in survival mode, or you had that? Oh my goodness, because you actually kept working and had nannies and they were young girls. So yeah, fill us in on some of those stories.
Well, especially when there are multiple children, and then, in our society now, everybody's, trying to establish themselves, either climbing the corporate ladder or creating a business or kind of, trying to survive financially, that, it's really just, it becomes for the families sometimes just about, let's just have our to-do list and get these things done.
Right.
So people kind of give up this, being, in the world, and it's all based on what do we have to do today.
Mhm.
And sometimes kids don't have the same roadmap that the parent has in their mind. And so the parents are saying, quick, do this, or go get that, or finish this, or do your homework now, or set the table, or, whatever it is. And so they're kind of being pulled in all different directions and not having the ability to, predict what's going to happen next. And it creates a lot of insecurity and, upset because they don't know what comes next.
Yep.
So this living in survival mode is not a great way to have them start thinking for themselves. It makes them more reactionary to everything in life rather than proactive.
Yeah, they're not responding to directions, they're just reacting. And it takes a lot of neural energy to keep your ears on, to listen. So when you're in more of a team place in life with your kids, then it's not about reacting, it's about responding, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool. Yeah. And so when you get out of survival mode, you get more in the flow, and the kids actually know what's coming next, right? I mean, my background's special ed, so man, transitions, whew, the T word. I worked at a psychiatric day treatment center even with kindergarten through fifth graders, and transitions were, the worst. So preparing the kids for transitions, that's a great way to keep the flow going. What else helps to keep a family in flow?
Right. So one of the, really the ultimate goal, and in my mind, is that a family is a fluid, harmonious team that can work together and play together and enjoy that process while they're all growing together. And that's, what I call in the flow. One of the things I teach in my classes is how to have family meetings. So it's really just about, having the discipline to sit down once a week, and if you can't do it twice a month, we'll work, and talk about, well, what's the schedule this week? Who's got what coming up? Where do we want to take our vacation this year? Give appreciations to each other. Thanks for doing me a favor the other day. And just continually connecting and being clear about the communication. And then when a family is regularly having family meetings, if a problem comes up, they're more able, they have the skills to work together to actually solve that problem as a team.
Very cool.
And again, provides an encouraging space. It anchors children and the parents to the home being a place where they can feel secure and happy and unconditionally loved.
Yeah. And just being able to say whatever and not have it be reacted to, right?
Right.
That's that part of that safety, that the parent can handle it. They
Right.
can take it in, not reflect it as, I'm a bad parent, or I would never want my child to talk like that, or whatever. They just have that safety zone, that safety net. I love it. Okay. So appreciate your children. And I love this one, like lean into their strengths. So let's talk about appreciating children and leaning into their strengths.
So, so part of, creating that, that harmonious group that works together is recognizing the capabilities that each child has. And obviously at different ages, they will be capable of different things. But even 3-year-olds, start to say, me do it, me do it. They want to do something for themselves. They want to contribute. They want to be part of it. And unfortunately, most of us say, oh no, you're too little. I'll do that. And rather than do that, what we recommend is find something that they can do, a way that they can communicate. So if you're emptying the dishwasher, put the plastic cups on the bottom of the dishwasher and find a low drawer that they go in and have them do that as their job. Yeah. So you're appreciating the things that they can do and communicating that.
I love it. Connect and communicate. Tell us a little bit more about what you mean by connect and communicate.
So we live in a very disconnected world where we've got our heads in our phones and our iPads. We're busy to try to get things done and get to the next place we need to get to. And it's really important, especially in this world that these kids are growing up in, that we practice connecting as human beings. So sitting down there, looking them in the eye, sitting next to them at the table, and really having a conversation is not something a lot of parents really make the time for. So we talk about that, how important that is. And it is amazing the feedback that I get from parents when they say, oh, I set aside 15 minutes this week to just play with my child and be totally uninterrupted and totally be present.
Yeah.
And how my child behaved the rest of the week.
Yes.
And so that really goes hand in hand.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. And encouragement versus praise. Oh, I love that topic.
Yeah. So we as a society right now, and I know I'm making a lot of generalizations, obviously there are plenty of exceptions, but we as a society right now went through kind of a whole praise phase where all the parent educators were saying, make sure you tell them good job, good job, good job. And so we're all positive. But what ended up happening is it was kind of empty. So the distinction that I make between encouragement and praise is that encouragement is really about noticing specifically what the child did without judgment so that they know how to repeat it. So rather than saying, great soccer game today, you could say, I noticed every time you got the ball, you ran down the field 100% and looked for the next pass.
Nice.
So they know, what did I do? And you can connect it to an outcome, and then you passed it and the person made a goal, so that they know, what did I do? How did I do it well? And they also know you noticed it. You weren't sitting there talking to the other mom. You were paying attention to them. And so that's very encouraging and nurturing. The praise, the good soccer game is better than saying nothing.
Right.
But it's not as nurturing. It's a little empty. And after you say it, a lot of times they just say, yeah, blah, blah, blah. Good job, good job, good job.
Yeah, yeah. They're they're so perceptive. It's like, yeah, you're supposed to say that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Allow mistakes. I love that. Instead of allow for mistakes, allow mistakes. You're going to make them. The kids are going to make them. And really, there aren't any ways. Let's all just learn from what we did, right?
Right.
All the outcomes.
Yeah. So we tend to caution. Don't run too far or too fast because you'll fall and skin your knee. Be careful when you're pouring the milk. You might spill it. Stop your arms from waving because you might hurt somebody. So kids are going to make mistakes, and we need to allow them to make those mistakes, and then also live by the consequences of the choices that they make or the mistakes that they make.
Yeah.
And our reaction to the mistakes, if it's like, oh my gosh, you spilled the milk again, there's kind of some shaming and some upset in that they're going to feel. But if we just say, oops, what do we need to do now? Get the rag and clean it up. We're not only saying it's okay to make mistakes, but we're also saying you're responsible for your behavior. When you spill the milk, then you're responsible for cleaning it up. And I'd be happy to train you how to do that so that every time it happens, you can do that.
Right, right. I'm here to facilitate and reflect back, right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
And so in doing that, you get to be ready, and so you're not going to be ready. You're going to be reactive if you're not fully present, right? So being present, being in the moment, not thinking of 50 million other things you have to do next, but just really zeroing in, even if everybody's on a roll and then somebody is falling apart, just being fully present with that calm voice and just taking that moment, because if you don't, it's going to take lots of moments, or whatever you were attempting to do isn't going to happen anyways. So you might as well just check your ego at the door and be fully present with that wonderful soul in front of you.
Right, right. And it's also important to be present with your own little voice in your head, your own self-talk. So that when something happens, instead of saying, oh, not again, because immediately you're going to react in a negative way, but to say, oh, okay, a mistake. What do we do about it now? Or you say, oh, not again. Oh, there's that voice. Okay, how can I change that voice to react in a more positive way?
Yeah, and oh, not again is like so ego. It's so you being like selfish, because it's like, that's your stuff, and it has nothing to do with your child, but you're taking your stuff and you're shaming and putting it onto your child. And any child psychologist would tell you that's just not cool.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
We all know that one. Okay. Yeah. So it's about noticing. I always about noticing is like staying that one step ahead, which my kids, it was almost impossible. And I worked really hard at it, but just noticing and staying that one step ahead, and that underneath, like, here's what's happening, but what's underneath it? Why is it happening? Where is this coming from? And then dealing with that. My son, I sold Discovery toys when my kids were little, and my son knew how to play with all the pieces, parts, and put them all together, and take the covers and put the bottoms in the covers, blah blah. And my daughter would just get into the cupboards and trash everything. And it's like, one day I was like, duh, I never sat down with her and showed her how to do that. Take a cover off and put the bottom in the cupboard. That's like the number one thing that happens to games, is the cover gets taken off and somebody steps on the cover. So just turn the cover over and put the box in the cover. I had to keep my stuff like looking new. So I taught him a lot of things he could do at a really young age. And my kids were pretty ahead of themselves anyways. He was talking like sentences at 13 months. So I said, I am going to just be there, fully present and noticing, and kind of like just walking her through. And I'm going to do this for as long as it takes, even it takes a whole week. And it just took one morning, and that was it. She did it. It was so cool, where she had just been pulling everything off the shelves and just trashing it all. It's really interesting how quickly she caught on. Yeah.
Well, this idea of looking at the belief behind the behavior is kind of a core part of all the programs that I teach. All the programs are based on Adlerian psychology, the psychology of Alfred Adler. And one of the premises is that the goal of all human behavior is the desire to belong, and to belong to the group.
Right.
So the first group that our children are born into is the family. And that as parents, if we show them how to belong, for instance, like encouraging them or training them to clean up the Discovery toys in a way that works, they see this is a way that I can contribute. When they're not capable because they haven't been trained, or they're too little, or they don't know how, then they have no choice but to try to figure it out. And of course, it doesn't follow the same logic as we follow. So this idea of them belonging to the group, and that's usually what's behind the behavior, can help parents recognize positive, productive behavior, and also why this negative behavior is happening, and then how to redirect it into a positive way.
Nice. Very cool. And how about reflect?
So, so many times and this is part of allowing mistakes too, at the end of the day, parents are laying in bed beating themselves up for, oh, I lost my cool, I didn't handle that the way I wanted to. So it's important to reflect on that. It's also important to be kind to yourself and give yourself permission to be a learner, because maybe you're a parent of a 4-year-old last year, but you're a parent of a 5-year-old this year. So
yes.
that's a new thing.
That's
right?
Huge. Like, wait a minute. Reflect is like, wait a minute. What am I dealing with here?
So reflect on how you're doing as a parent, what other skills you need to adopt, what you're working on, how you're going to go about doing that. And then also reflect back to them what you're seeing, what you're observing from them, because that's very encouraging to be noticing and communicate that to them.
My son's behavior would just go off the chart just before he would transition into sort of that next stage of development. So when he was ready to like sit at the kitchen table on a stool versus his high chair, being in a high chair, I mean, his behavior was nuts, and it was just like, I was like digging, like, what is this, you know, and trying to get it all figured out. And then all of a sudden I realized, you know, sitting at the table is like where he is headed. And sure enough, as soon as he was sitting at the table, everything just chilled. It was so amazing. So, you know, that whole notice and reflect thing worked really, really well. You know, once I caught on to, where is this behavior coming from? Oh, he must be ready to make a transition. And I've been able to use that in my work with kids, even like academically, when they don't want to do their work or whatever. They're either bored because they're ready to move on, or there's a skill in there that is frustrating them that they don't quite have yet. So it's been really helpful to notice and to reflect.
Yeah.
All right. Very cool. Anything else you'd like to say to just sum everything up, Lisa?
Just one thing that, you know, through all the work that I've done with many, many, many parents, you know, the only thing, the main thing that I've seen in every single parent is how much they love their children. And they come to me out of that love for them, knowing they want more for them, you know, and maybe they're not providing it at that moment. And so that's causing frustration. So
Right.
I so appreciate, you know, the love that I see. And then I also appreciate the parents that say, you know, I'm not giving them my best, so I better go find out how I can be a better parent.
Yeah. Which is exactly what you did.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. You can find Lisa on Facebook at Parenting Matters NJ. She's a New Jersey girl. And do you work remotely with people too? Do you work online?
Yes, I do. I do one-on-one coaching with parents, and then also have classes and workshops in the New Jersey area.
Wonderful. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. It's always fun talking with you and sharing our similar views on things.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for having me, Linda.
You're so welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.